Sikorski's Thinkabouts, and I'm your host, Laura Sikorski. My guests and I share our operations and technology expertise to help you provide outstanding customer service and customer experiences. As you can tell, we're on Skype again today, but today we are calling our guests Jeannine Stewart and Reg Price. They are co-founders of MirrorWave and joining us from Rosedale, Auckland, New Zealand. And they are almost like a day and a half ahead of us. But welcome. I know it's real early for you guys. Our topic is going to be about feedback surveys. Everybody hates doing surveys. You get the surveys in, and then there is just mounds and mounds and mounds, and you're like, oh, forget it. I don't even know what I'm going to do with them. But these two very brilliant people made a decision to really automate the process. And I think what I love best is their surveys are 3 questions. And I think that makes a big difference. I had a guest recently, his name is Shep Hyken, and he is a customer service guru, experienced, amazing customer service speaker. And he says he never completes surveys unless they're 3 questions. So I'm definitely going to send him the information. What I like about MirrorWave is also the back end. And the back end will give everyone here, what do you do with all that feedback that you've got, and how do you take what the customer says and use it? So with that, I again am so excited to have you both here. As you could tell, this is Reg Price, and of course that is Jeannine Stewart. And thank you again for joining us. Reg, what's wrong today about that whole feedback experience?
Yes, Laura, you said that people hate surveys. In fact, we have a little saying that we use at MirrorWave, which is that people hate surveys but love being listened to. And so we think it's a very underwhelming experience for one main reason. And that main reason is that marketers are mostly the people who commission feedback. So they see things through a marketing lens rather than through a relationship lens.
Well, I totally agree because, many times I do a lot of work in the healthcare industry, and when I remember, you get, if you're in a hospital and then you get a feedback survey, it's got to be like 40 or 50 questions. Mm-hmm. And after a while, you're saying, you know what, I can't be bothered with this anymore. And again, it's marketing is using it for one reason, but nobody really goes and looks at what the customer really said or what the patient really said.
Yes.
Reg,
yes, that's absolutely true. I mean, there's not a problem with looking at feedback from a marketing lens, but we need to realize that marketers are looking at this feedback in order to supply metrics, reporting maybe up to a more senior level, or they're interested in generalization. So you hear marketers talk about insights. Whereas if you're looking at feedback from a relationship lens, then relationship managers are interested in what's happening with individuals, what they feel, what can we do about that relationship or that experience to improve it, and if we did do something, did it work? And these are 2 very, very different, both important, but 2 very, very different perspectives.
What have you found, and I'm going to digress with a little another question. What have you found that customers generally complain about or have issues with when you get your surveys back?
I think that the commonality across all customers is that people really value the timeliness and how well they're communicated with. I think those are the 2 things that come across very strongly, that it's, I try to contact you, am I able to get through? Did I get through to who I wanted to speak to? Did we fully discuss what we needed to? Did they come back to me when they said they would? How long did it take for my issue to be resolved? Did I feel that I was communicated with adequately through that process? That's, the human nature of interaction, that comes through very strongly. And then it gets down to the more specifics around the products and the services and the commercials perhaps, and, all of the other things that tend to come through.
Well, what do you think the key problems are? You had, you talk about cues and irregularities. Could you expand a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think, typically the key problems that we see in gathering feedback throughout the industry at the moment is that people are looking at snapshots. And, quite often questionnaires or surveys are still anonymous, which, for the reason that they feel, the organisation that's commissioning it feels that they want their customers to be free to be as honest and open as possible. But that's not helping strengthen the relationship, because then how do you get to action and follow up on that feedback when you don't know who said it? And there's too many questions. As you said before, Laura, people have a limited amount of time, and they need to be able to say what is important to them and not be put into boxes by the company who's commissioning the feedback.
I know I recently did a survey for one of our healthcare clients, and we found that people wanted to be anonymous. And I was like, but how can we help if you're bringing up an issue that perhaps we want to talk to you real time, or have you in for a focus group, and we can't get in touch with them? So would you say that the majority of your snapshots or your questionnaire responses are anonymous?
Actually, all of ours are non-anonymous. We strongly believe that, if you invite a person to give feedback, which is key, I think, in this step, to be courteous, that you should invite them to give feedback and say to them, look, your feedback is so important to us that we want to know what you said, and we will come back to you with some action around that. So, we feel very strongly that it should be non-anonymous, attributed.
Non-anonymous. I totally agree with you. It just makes more sense. It makes more business sense, because how can they help the company that's doing the survey if they really can't talk to them at another point?
Exactly.
In talking about participants, Reg, are better than respondents? I'm not sure I understand. Your question to us was talking about how participants are better than respondents. What would a good experience for a participant feels like? Now, try to say that 3 times fast.
It's a really good question. So at MirrorWave, we've banned a couple of words. We're not allowed to use them in the company, and one of them is respondent. We think this is a very ugly word, and we think that it captures everything that is wrong about the experience that most people have when they fill in feedback. You're a respondent. The company wants to elicit feedback from you. It doesn't say anything about you participating in this process. I've got a really good story which I think illustrates this, Laura. I got a phone call with no warning from a participant in a MirrorWave program for a client, and he was a scientist in a agricultural research institute, and he said, Reg, I'm a scientist. I think this feedback stuff, we all know this isn't real science. I do real science. And I said, well, I don't know about this, but tell me what you're thinking. And he said, well, I got a phone call from my account manager who I'd never properly met. So that was actually quite good. And he explained to me that they were wanting to run this program, a listening program, not a survey, and that we would do and made certain promises about what was going to happen. And he said, well, I felt fairly skeptical, but when he said to me that it's only 3 questions twice a year, I thought, well, I will do this. And so when the questionnaire arrived, it actually really was only 3 questions. You can get into a survey where they say it'll only take a minute, and 20 minutes down the line, you still are doing it. And he said, so I filled it out, and when I pressed submit, I felt like, the jury is out, what's going to happen? And he said, well, blow me down, if not the next day, my account manager got back to me, was really decisive about what he wanted to do, asked me some questions about my feedback and said, this is what I'm going to do. He said, I was absolutely blown away by this. And then he said a couple of weeks later, I was blown away even more when a very senior person in this company who I'd never met before and I'd heard about rang me up and said, look, I just want to tell you that we're doing this and we're doing that, and that we have really valued your feedback. He said, I was so blown away by this whole process that I stood up from my desk.
Excellent.
So I think that story is, for listeners, I would be saying that you should think very carefully about how you craft your participant experience so that they really feel like they're part of this process.
And part of the end result. Well,
Yes.
we, believe it or not, we're halfway through our show, so we're going to take our few second break, and we'll be right back with you.
Fantastic.
Hi, I'm Tim Stead. I'm from Star Communications. We're a marketing support company. And if you need help with your next marketing project, please call 273-1900, or you can go to our website, starcommunications.us.
Welcome back to Sikorski's Think Abouts, and I'm your host, Laura Sikorski. Joining me today are Jeannine Stewart and Reg Price, co-founders of MirrorWave, and they're coming to us from Auckland, New Zealand. Now, before the break, we were talking quite a bit about snapshots and participants. So I think we're going to ask Jeannine this question. What do you really mean by snapshots?
I think a lot of feedback is garnered these days through an interaction. For example, what you're mentioning earlier, Laura, about you go to a hospital and you get a questionnaire afterwards. So people are looking for feedback on the experience, the snapshot of the experience that you've just had, which is difficult in that it doesn't tell you what happened before that snapshot or after the snapshot. So by snapshots, we're looking very much at a point in time without the context of the before and after, the relationship that's building over time.
Right. Okay. What are, Jeannine, this is for you. What are most companies around the world doing today about feedback?
So they are very much looking at the snapshot view. So they are taking a point in time and still doing very cross-sectional research rather than gathering feedback that tells a story. So an example could be that a company will go out to a group of their customers or stakeholders and they will gather feedback and say, okay, well, our average rating hasn't gone up, but it hasn't gone down, so that's okay. Whereas what they're not seeing is the amount of churn that's happening within the feedback, that some people's scores are increasing, but also quite a few are also decreasing. So, it still seems to be a very cross-sectional view rather than following a relationship.
Right. And we all know it's the business relationship that's what, the loyalty and the customers that keep you profitable. Let's face it, right?
That's right.
Yes, definitely.
Customer retention.
Absolutely. So, Reg, what is a better approach to feedback?
Yeah, so we believe there is another option. So rather than taking snapshots of interactions, we think a better option is to follow people.
Without being creepy.
Yes,
Right.
follow people in a positive way. And a great analogy for this is going to the doctor, right? So if you're not feeling well, you will go to the doctor more often than you will if you're feeling well, right?
Absolutely.
So our philosophy is that you should be following people on a much more regular basis if you're really interested in their relationship. So a doctor, if you think about it, when you go to a doctor, each time you go and visit them, they measure the same things, maybe your height, your weight, your blood pressure, and they'll ask some of the same questions. How much you're drinking, what are you eating? And every time you go there, they're asking these same questions. And they're asking these same questions so they can see what is shifting in your medical history. And so what we try and do, if you like, is build up a medical history of the relationship that our client has with their customers. It puts you in a position where you can firstly make a very accurate diagnosis because you can see what is changing, to Jeannie's point. But secondly, once you've made a prescription, so in other words, you've taken some action with that relationship, you can see whether that's improved that relationship or not. So we call this the longitudinal approach. So it's quite a scientific approach, but it's really very simple. And what it means is that you can ask just 3 questions. So you can ask a question like, what do you think about your relationship with X company? And then you can ask a question following that, what were the positives? And then you can ask a question, what are the negatives? And if you can imagine following a relationship story over time, you can see what is changing and why.
Now, so if I'm understanding, do you ask the same questions in the same, like a wave, and then 3 months later the same questions again? So
Yes,
that's
exactly.
how you gauge the differences.
Yes, so it's exactly like a doctor does. We're
Right.
measuring and asking the same questions each time, and we're looking for shifts in the relationship. Because if a relationship is like a car crash, fallen over the cliff, gone from a 10 to a 2, there's so much more that you can do with it, as Jeannie said, if you know what the before, the during, and the after.
Right,
So
and then you have, you may have introduced new product, or you may have had a delivery issue, and so it's like the light bulb went off in my head.
Yes.
I have to say that, but it really makes a whole lot of sense out there, and I'm really glad that we qualified that. Jeannie, can you give us an example of a company that is doing this?
Sure. We have one of our clients in the States is Dimension Data, an ICT firm, and they're doing a really good job of, they've got a very satisfied customer base. They've got a very high level of people that are delighted with what they do. But, you would tend to see that, that level of satisfaction would, hope to stay high, but they seem to still be improving it wave upon wave. And how they're doing that is through a combination of ensuring that they give a direct one-to-one response to the feedback. So the client manager goes back to every person that's given feedback and discusses it with them. So they're doing that very well. And then also at a strategic account management level, they're getting then the key people within both organizations together to collectively talk about the feedback and decide on bigger actions that need to take place. And then that filters up again to the C level, where their CEO wanders around whenever he's going to a client meeting. He has in his back pocket a printout of all of the feedback.
Literally.
Which, literally, he walks around with it and he reads it before he goes in to meet with the client. So at all levels of their organization, they're strongly focusing on listening and responding.
Well,
and they're doing a very good job of getting into the rhythm of doing that.
And it's so important because how many of the corporations out there, and I don't care if they're large, medium, small, they don't listen to the customer. And this is a perfect example of how Dimension Data is using the surveys, using the waves, and proactively visiting their clients.
Absolutely. And another thing that they're doing very well is that each wave they pick one thing, one larger systemic issue to focus upon, and they work out, through the feedback, they say, okay, so this area perhaps needs a bit of tweaking, and they explore it, they work on it, and they communicate back to the entire feedback group to say that through the feedback we learned this and this is what we've been able to do. And so it's a really good way of showing that they're using it as a relationship building but also an improvement program.
Now, do you find that they regionally do the feedback, or is this a global when they send out the waves?
It works, the Dimension Data program is a global program. Throughout about 30 countries internationally, and so each region looks at their own action points and the feedback within each region, and then they build it up globally as well. So they do it at all levels. They're doing a really good job of looking at it individually and then by each level above that.
Gee, I'm going to have to call my local dimension data rep and say, can I come and see the waves thing? Oh my goodness. Well, listen, we are just about out of time. And we always like at the end of the show to talk about what our guests' takeaways are or our think-abouts. So in your opinion, after our 20 or so minutes together, what would you say are the top 2 or 3 items that our viewers should think about?
I'll start with that. I think the first one is to think of the people that are giving feedback as being participants, not respondents, that they are people that you are listening to. I think for me that's, the first key message.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second one is what we call, Laura, stories, not stats. So we think that stats are important, but telling stories by following people over time is so much more important. And that kind of leads on to a second, maybe our third takeout, which is that there are a lot of people out there talking about big data, but we like to talk about long data, long connected up data. So we would say to your listeners, think about how long your data is, not necessarily how big it is.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an absolutely fabulous show, and I appreciate the fact that you took time from your busy days and from Auckland to give us all the great things that are happening with MirrorWave. And for all of our viewers, to reach Reg, his email address is reg.price@mirrorwave.com, and the main office is country code where, because we are a global network, so use your appropriate country code and to 649-413-6948. Now to reach Jeannine, she is JEANNIE.Stewart@mirrorwave.com, and maybe my accent is not too well, it may be a little bit, it's MIRROR wave, WAVE.com. And you do have a stateside representative, and her name is Lisa Stockberger, and she is, I love her title, Value Maximizer. And that's a good word, folks out there, for, how you can get help from MirrorWave. And Lisa, it's LISA.stock, STOCK Berger, @mirrorwave.com, and her office number stateside is 574-217-7186. To me, it's Laura Sikorski at earthlink.net, and certainly same name on Twitter. But we would also like to thank Karen Murphy-Caro, who is the founder and CEO of the Daily Blue and the Blue Chip feeling around the world and our network. And she can be reached at 631-761-9223. And of course, we always want to thank Sam, who is our videographer this afternoon, for making us all look wonderful. And with that, I wish everyone a great afternoon and have a perfect rest of the day.